Welcome into the Living Room Disciple podcast. We are so glad you're with us today for a fun episode as we talk about the way we have been formed by media, specifically children's movies. We are who we are in part because of the media we consumed when our minds were so impressionable as young children. So are there messages we received that we need to unlearn today? And is there a better way forward for our kids? All that plus some nostalgia on this episode of the Living Room Disciple podcast, where discipleship finds a home.
What was your favorite movie as a kid?
Mine, so the one that won't offend anybody is The Lion King.
Wait, hold on.
You'll see.
Okay.
My parents also introduced me at a very young age to Jurassic Park, which is not an offensive movie, but it's probably not a movie a 4-year-old should be watching. But I was all in.
I would not let my 4-year-old.
No, but I was all in, and they said that it was just kind of second nature to me, so I didn't think it was scary. I just kind of thought, yeah, dinosaurs, awesome.
It's not the dinosaurs that's the problem. It's the eating people that's the problem.
Right. Which, comes with the dinosaurs. How about you? What was your favorite movie?
Star Wars.
Yeah, nice.
100%. Yeah. It was funny too, because growing up, like we had kind of a really complicated relationship with Star Wars. I feel like my family for a time, it was like, you can't watch that. You can watch that. And then by the time I got into my teen years, we would obsess over Star Wars. So yeah, I mean, that was back when it was nerdy.
Yeah.
Before Disney bought it and it was popularized and all that. But yeah, Star Wars 100%. But then there was a bunch of we were I think my parents subscribed to some Disney club. So like we literally had every Disney VHS.
Nice.
And then eventually, DVD. And so I watched them all, every Pixar movie, every Disney movie, every Disney Channel movie.
Nice.
We were really inundated. And I got thinking, actually, when we began the original kind of brainstorming for this podcast, a year and a half ago, this was actually one of the topics I first wanted to talk about, because I think we're both millennials, so we kind of come from this 90s kind of a generation and 90s media, which I think has kind of like its own flavor. And I think that the way that we consumed TV and the types of content we were consuming on TV in the 90s, in large part has contributed to a lot of the discontentment and a lot of the frustration and a lot of the difficulties that millennial adults are facing now.
Tell me more about that. I'm intrigued by this.
Okay. So the kid formula of the 90s, I'm sure it hasn't changed drastically now, but there was so much of it. There's this, every movie has like this formula, and it always begins with kid doesn't have something or someone in their life. They go on small adventure, maybe whether it be like literal adventure or metaphorical figurative adventure, right? Like some drama in their life. But in the 90s, it seemed that almost all the media did not result in the child changing their wants or growing in contentment or anything like that. It became successful when they got what they wanted. And I think that like the really iconic of 90s media, I'll use like a silly example. But like, do you remember the Goofy movie?
Yeah.
Okay. And so it's like this road trip adventure between, Goofy and his son, who I do not remember at the moment. Max. Good.
Max
all
Goof,
right.
which by the way, doesn't that mean that Goofy's name is Goofy Goof? Anyway, continue.
Why is this on the top of your mind? All right. And don't get me wrong, Max grows. He learns to love and appreciate his dad, and his dad learns to appreciate him. And there's this, right? It's like this not so hard won kind of growth. But in the end, Max gets to be on stage with the band of his dreams,
Yeah.
And that is every kids movie that we
Right.
grew up with.
Right. Yeah.
And so success or meaningful growth was connected to, always was
Hmm.
connected to the achievement of the thing you wanted.
Getting what you wanted, even if it didn't look like you thought it would look in the first place.
Oh, it always had to look better.
Yeah.
You didn't just go to the concert, you were on stage with the band.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know? Now you
Yeah.
can't even buy tickets to the concert, right?
Right.
Ticketmaster's gonna, anyways. But like,
Different
you know what I mean?
conversation.
Like this is, and I actually, I really do think, and this and other things, but that pattern of consistent inundation of media, and I'm sure this began in the 70s, 80s, but 90s kids grew up in front of the TV.
Hmm.
Like a lot of us, like we were in front of the television all the time, just like kids I think now are often in front of phones and tablets, which is a whole another set of issues. But for us, it was in front of the TV. Like we we knew the show we were going to watch when we got home. Like we knew what we were going to watch on Saturday mornings or on Sunday mornings. Like our lives kind of revolved around the TV schedule, the movies coming out, because we watched the commercials, seen the new movies. And so you kind of get this formula fed into you. And I feel like it shaped us into people who aren't content
Hmm.
unless we've achieved our dreams.
Right.
And our dreams don't need to change. The world needs to change to accommodate it.
Interesting. Yeah. First of
I
all,
push back a little bit.
I will say that my only pushback is that Jurassic Park does not fit in that.
That is true. Well, it's not a kids movie, Nick.
It is if you make it one. No, just
well,
kidding.
okay.
I have not
In that
showed
case,
it to my
Saving
kids,
Private
to be
Ryan
clear.
was also
Yeah,
not
right,
a movie.
right.
I mean, like, it's just everybody.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think in a lot of ways with our modern, I think we easily forget that our modern technology, even being able to hear a music recording anytime you want, is incredibly rare, and it's a incredible privilege that we can listen to a song anytime we want to without having to go to the opera house or the concert hall or even the local saloon to hear the piano player, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So to take our modern technology and our forms of entertainment that are available to us at any time, which in a way gives you the message like your desires can be fulfilled at any time you want in this way that you choose. It takes that medium and then adds to it the literal message of your contentment is on the other side of you getting what you want. And so in the 90s, it was popping a VHS tape into the VCR or whatever.
Yeah.
And knowing
And then
when
getting so annoyed when somebody didn't rewind it.
yeah, yeah, or somebody recorded over it.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. But when I put this into this machine, I'm going to get my desire met. I'm going to watch the movie that I want to watch. And now, how much more? We're going a little off topic here, but how much more with apps and even with streaming, the choices that we have are just continuing to push that same message of we are the results of our choices, and our desires are what really make us. And then in a lot of ways, I think we are freezing ourselves, paralyzing ourselves with the amount of choices that we have. But I hadn't really made the connection to the plots of the movies that you're describing. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. I will say the only thing that was good about cable was the only choice you had to make was what channel you were going to turn to.
Right.
It's almost like now, but anyways, that's beside the point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think about the way that what we choose to let our children watch has a deep formational effect on what they expect in life, on what they understand to be good and bad. And I'm not just talking about morality. Like, I think one of the things that I've had to process through as an adult is that grief is not bad.
Yeah.
Right? Grief is a normal part of the human experience. And you can grieve in ways that are healthy and you grieve in ways that are unhealthy. But the experience of grief, although I will say it's a result of sin and all that. So in that capacity, like it's a bad thing. But like it's a human emotion that in and of itself is not sinful or wrong. And it isn't something that we fight against, but we learn to process through. The reason I'm bringing that up is like by accident, when we provide our children consistent media inputs that show life absent of that emotion, I'm using this as just an example, like we're not arming our children with the ability to process through grief. And I'm bringing this up because I think a normal response to what I'm saying would be, Phil, it's not, Disney or is Cartoon Network around? Cartoon Network's job to like
Yeah.
teach my kids how to grieve. And I fully agree with that. The problem is we art is how we learn, in part how we grieve, right? Like
Yeah.
art is supposed to be one way that humans begin to learn how to grieve or process anger. Like we process, like art helps us do that. And the only art we feed our children is so often really shallow, superficial, money grab junk that runs on oh my gosh. Like as a quick example, so for Mother's Day, my wife really wanted to watch that new Disney movie, Wish, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's totally fine. It has like the living room disciple like stamp of safe approval, I guess. But it was just so. I guess it was to celebrate 100 years of Disney, but it was just so boring and so like flat and very Disney. And I don't mean that as an insult or a slight. It was a very safe Disney movie that hit all the plot beats that you totally expect. At the very beginning of the movie, you knew exactly what the end of the movie was going to be, right? And it just had little character outside of just the cute, quirky Disney-ness of it. That is not wrong. I don't think that we shouldn't like watch Disney with our kids. My problem is if I only let my children consume that type of media without intending to, I'm telling them this is what they should expect from life. And I don't mean the dumb lamb sidekick character and magic, whatever. I mean, what we're doing is we're pitching them that your satisfaction comes from the fulfillment of your wishes, in this case, like they're on the nose. Your satisfaction in life comes from the happy ending. And that, I think in the 90s, for a lot of us, that was a majority, if not the exclusivity of the media we were consuming, right? Very few people were putting really good books in our hands. I'm sure there were really excellent kids' movies out there, but most, like, they weren't on the popular stations or in, at least I wasn't exposed to them. And they definitely weren't the majority. And so for my children, like I'm really conscious about the types of books that we read and trying to let them process through tougher films that process through more difficult things in still child appropriate ways, because those help paint deeper, more richer pictures of life. And I'm not talking about being traumatic, like with dinosaurs eating people. I'm just saying, like, creating an environment in which the exposure to media is diverse and handles tougher things, and that shows life as not so flat, and that the fulfillment of your desires is actually an unlikely reality in your human existence. Like most of us, even in Western America, will get to our 30s and do more grieving about what did not happen and then celebrating what did. And that's a sad condition, and that's things we have to process through, but that is still reality. And when we consistently pitch media that doesn't even like process through that, I think it can actually be more damaging than helpful.
Yeah, I was thinking about Lion King as one example, but there were several movies in our childhood in the 90s. Land Before Time, Bambi.
Mm-hmm.
Bambi was
Mm-hmm.
earlier.
Oh, the parents always died.
But all these movies where somewhere in the first half of the film, there's this just traumatic, horrible, like
Mm-hmm.
have to face a death that you never expected to face kind of
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not that the grief is not present. And I think
Mm-hmm.
processing through those films can actually be helpful for a child to see
Yes.
my reality is not just this terrible thing that happened to me. There is life and hope on the other side.
Yeah.
But where I think what you're describing, where it can fall flat, is that hope and that life on the other side is usually just another experience that the joy is greater than the sadness, rather than
Yeah.
actually sitting in the sadness and
Mm-hmm.
seeing how you're going to grow as a person, or as a character in this case, in the sadness. How is the grief actually going to
Mm-hmm.
form you and teach you something and shape you? How is the grief going to allow you to process how much you loved that person? All the things that we need to look to grief for as whole human beings. And I think one really good example of this that doesn't necessarily have grief, but
Mm-hmm.
is the movie Inside Out, which
I
is
was
a
thinking
little
of
bit
that.
more recent. Yeah,
Yeah.
and really the whole, not spoiler alert, I guess it's not really a plot spoiler, but
It's
kind of
been
the whole.
around a long time. We are spoiling the junk
Exactly.
out of this. You should have seen Inside
Exactly.
Out. Pause
Yeah.
and go watch Inside Out if you
Go
haven't
watch
seen
it
it.
and come back. But kind of the whole theme of the movie is if you live as if joy is your only emotion and live just to hit joy, 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 happiness,
Yeah.
happiness, happiness. If you live that way, you're gonna miss so much, because you actually need to listen to your sadness. It's
Mm-hmm.
through listening to your sadness that you find your ultimate joy.
Mm-hmm.
And what a message to give to children who,
Yeah.
I think kids, one of the things they can teach us as adults is, like, there is still joy to be seen in this world. Like, it's not just clock in from 9 to 5,
Yeah.
go home, make dinner, do the laundry, go to sleep. Like, there's still joy to be found. Like, stop and smell the roses, find ways to celebrate and be happy and joyful, and find the silver linings. But on the flip side, I think kids need to learn this very adult lesson that our
Mm-hmm.
sadness isn't just something to pass over or numb or skip as fast as we can. Our sadness is actually something that we can listen to and pay attention to and see how it's going to shape us, because it's something that we will face over and over and over again as long as we
Yeah.
live. And so I think that's a rare movie that gives that message. And hopefully that's a message that we receive more and more, as movies continue to come out for kids in our children's generation.
I think it's important too, and maybe this is almost like a continuation of some of our parenting conversations, because the key always has to be, almost always has to be the parent helping draw those themes out. I think
Yeah.
Lion King is a good example, because it wasn't until I watched Lion King as an adult with my kids that I saw some of those deeper, darker themes. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I remember, Simba's father dying and all the things, but like I didn't pause and think about it. And it's partly because in all movies, in Inside Out is probably the exception to the rule, because the movie was designed, and Pixar really is pretty quality. But um, and Lion King's a good example of like what immediately follows grief, the funniest part of the movie.
Yeah. It
And
just
that
kind
and
of
that's
becomes
part of the
silly. And
Disney thing, yeah.
yeah. And
And
even the message, the main song in that section is just don't worry about it. It means no
yes,
worries. Like, just don't worry about it. Don't think about that your dad just died.
yes,
Like, that's
and
not, that's probably not helpful.
yes, and I know the astute Lion King observer knows that it's a play on a Shakespeare play, and it's a whole thing, and it's deeper, and I get it, but that's not what kids are pulling out. Kids
Yeah.
are pulling out like, how do you? We don't know what kids are pulling out exactly. I don't want to be too prescriptive. I'm just saying, like, as a child, I watched Lion King probably once a year, like for the first 12 years of my life or something, something along those lines, and I never pulled out the deeper themes of them.
Right.
And so I do think there's the burden of responsibility for parents to watch this content with kids and help draw those things out. And that can often make all the difference. Good media does help quite a bit, but it is also, like, I think sheer volume. I grew up with a ton of forgettable. Do you remember the Disney Channel movies? Like, the movies are made
Yeah.
just to go, like, they were straight to Disney Channel.
Yeah.
I grew up with so many of those.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember a Smart House.
Yeah.
Okay, where also a parent dies. Why is it always? Anyway, um, which, by the way, just pause side. Maybe this matters. I don't know.
Yeah.
There was such a deep thematic element of the death of parents and the absence of parents that,
Yeah.
like, I don't want to go too deep because like I'm just not qualified, but there is something to be said about so much media that it's almost like these meaningful characters could only do meaningful things when they're absent, like
Mm.
parents and the change that parents brought. I don't know. Like, I don't think it was anybody's intent. I don't think anybody like twirled their maniacal mustache. I am not joking. As somebody who helps, who creates story, removing the parent characters at the beginning is a plot device that makes the plot easier going forward. You want to make a movie about a kid, parents are kind of a plot hole hiccup, right? And so like removing them actually makes a lot of things easier from your plot perspective. So I think it's one of the reasons so many of the movies we watched as kids had um, you know, some traumatic thing and whatever.
So the kid can do
Noble
whatever they
parents.
want.
There's an
The plot
element
can
of
go
that.
wherever. Yeah.
You're cutting down your character list. You're cutting down the potential constraints and plot problems that you have, which is why a lot of shows that or movies that had parents, the parents were often sidelined, unless parents were main characters because the story revolved around the parent-child relationship. But if the story did not revolve around the parent-child relationship, oftentimes parents were sidelined, and sometimes death was a convenient plot device to make that happen, which sounds terrible and ridiculous, but there you go. How did that form us? But
Yeah.
but
For
yeah,
real.
oh man, now I'm kind of thinking about that a little much. But okay,
Yeah.
but back to the '90s movies. But no, I do think that for our listeners who are like in their upper 20s to late 30s, if being conscious of how our view of reality and our expectations for our lives were shaped by all the media we grew up with, but honestly by so much TV we watched. And then I guess getting into college and beyond social media. But prior to that, in the most formative years of our life, we were being formed by media that was free of pain. Many of us were sitting in, not all of us, but many of us were sitting in air conditioned homes, staring at a TV, and maybe terrible things were happening around us, like parents were fighting or whatever. Yeah, I, maybe had similar experiences to that. And there's all these difficulties and challenges, but we found like that sense of escapism in these stories that were overly optimistic and so geared towards happy endings that I feel like, at least me, I began to perceive that like this is part of what success looks like. This is part of what, if I reach these certain goals. Um, and I think a lot of us don't want to admit it, but we went off to college with a Disney mindset, you know. And then we got out of college and we couldn't find jobs in our degrees, and most of us have degrees and jobs in very different fields.
Yeah.
And the average person that I talk to feels like they fell into their career.
Right.
And they're in their 30s and they're thinking about, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? Am I wasting my life? Am I not wasting my life? Should I be switching careers? Should I be going back to school? And it's like there's this early midlife crisis, I think, for people our age. And I
Mm.
don't want to contribute it all to movies, but I'm just saying, like, I feel like we set ourselves up to fail by creating an entertainment environment in that decade that said this is what happiness looks like,
Right.
and it was never attainable.
Yeah. That's so fascinating. And then I think we got a little bit older and there were American Idol started to get really big
Oh
and Shark
yeah.
Tank. And there would
Yeah.
always be, it wouldn't just be the let's listen to this person sing or let's hear the sales pitch for this product or this company. You would also have, if there was a really sad story that they overcame to be there that day to show off their incredible
Hmm.
talent or to make their $1 million sale or
Oh
whatever it
yeah.
was,
Yeah.
they would always weave that story in so that you can kind of have these tangible examples of the American dream being lived out. Like, look at this hardship I overcame. Um,
Yeah.
and I came to the other side and now look how successful I am or how talented I am. Or it's the retelling of that
Hmm.
same, I have a desire and the way that I am
Hmm.
a fulfilled person is by attaining that desire.
Yep.
And then the problem is that in real life, you attain that desire and you go, wait a minute, I'm still depressed, or I'm still anxious, or I still am really
Mm-hmm.
struggling, or I still don't have
Mm-hmm.
this, or I got that desire, but now I just want that other one even more, and I don't think I can get
Yeah.
that one, and we come to realize we are hit time and time again with this Ecclesiastes message of, is everything just meaningless? Is everything a vapor? Am I just here for a minute
Yeah.
and then I die? Because when we are given the message from childhood and even into adulthood, and honestly, you watch a State of the Union address or a presidential campaign address or anything.
Nobody watches those, but go on.
Yeah, no, but if you are
We
paying
watch the
attention
highlights on those later.
later, yeah. But if you're paying attention to political messaging, you're going to hear the same thing
Mm-hmm.
over and over again. You can accomplish anything you want to. You can, and
Yeah, as
it's the
long as you
message
vote for
that
me.
right. It's the message that continues to hit us in this country and form us into people
Yeah,
who believe
100%.
not just that anything is possible, which could be a helpful message, but also that if I haven't accomplished these things, I'm a failure. I should be depressed. I deserve this, right? Because the inverse of that message, I think, can be really damaging from childhood, but also in the ways we're receiving it as adults.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I was thinking about when you were just talking too is, and you would kind of reference this early on, there's a level of like the fact that the medium is the message.
Yeah.
So I want to be clear, I'm not knocking on movies. I love movies. I think movies are a fantastic art form. They're still movies, right? They're 90 minutes, unless you're Peter Jackson, and they're 3 hours, right? But like, they're just, like the movies we grew up on were 90 minutes. And so Simba's grief in The Lion King had to be processed through in, like whatever time was left in that movie, right? 45 minutes. And, whatever Rocky montage before he went to go fight, like, months of training or years of training had to be condensed down to a 3 minute, Eye of the Tiger. And again, it's the repetition of this type of medium. Most of us will have to experience, if parts of our hopes and dreams and desires that come to fruition, we will experience decades of long suffering.
Mm.
And this is why I think oftentimes books are a better medium. I guess maybe I'm biased, but the byproduct of reading is spending time
Yeah.
with the story, the characters, because shows are similar but not the same. But like, for example, in a show, you're watching this, let's say, well, in the age of binging, maybe not, but prior to binging, you would watch an episode a week or something, and so you're spending time with the characters. It's why Friends had such a cult following, because you're really watching the show over years, and you feel like you know these people. Well, with books, you're going to read a little bit every day. You're going to really be with these characters for like a month or 2 months. What I'm trying to get at is the medium of books gives you more time to spend and process what's going on. And so the grief of a character in a book, even if it follows a similar Disney format, you're going to spend longer in that grief by default. Like, just your eyes are going to skim and read words slower than frames will flash on a screen. Like, that simple fact means that the medium of books is going to help you process through that. Which, for what it's worth, is one of the reasons that kids should read, and we should get kids reading young and then put good books in their hands. Books, shout out to Andrew Peterson and like the Wingfeather Saga. I would just recommend that. Like, where they spend time with the characters and they feel what they feel over longer periods of time. I think that helps combat the influx of other media like shows or movies. And if you create this holistic image in a child's life, that the time is spent mostly on reading or audiobooks, that type of thing, and less on movies and TV, I think we're going to form our children well. Of course, we still have to talk about what content goes in, but um, provided we're giving deep, artistically, wow, my brain just blanked on that. Artistically good, like
Profound.
Because I have words, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like not crap. All right, that's all I'm trying to get at. You give them
Nailed
like
it.
it's not crap.
Way to
It's
say that in an
good.
artistically good way.
Thank you. Just you know, I need to get a thesaurus. Anyways, but that's one thing we found in our home. You know, a heavy emphasis on reading and spending time in the reading, and then smaller emphasis on books and shows, and we watch those together, and we often process them with our kids afterwards or during. Um, and I think that's forming our children really, really well.
I love that and wholeheartedly agree. But at the risk of feeling
Just
like
how about we just end with you agreeing?
I'm not going to disagree, I promise.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
good.
yeah.
All right.
At
Gosh.
the risk of undermining what we've been doing here and just kind of talking about the negative sides of movies, and
There
I
are
do
good
agree
stuff.
that books are
Yeah.
better, but I think
Yeah.
it'd be
Thank
helpful
you. They are
to
totally better.
I think it'd be helpful to talk about some of the things that we gain, some of the ways that we are
Yes.
positively formed
Yes,
towards
we do.
Christ as we watch films and movie, and kids movies specifically.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think probably you can totally disagree here, but I think probably the biggest gift that movies give to children is what we talked about in an episode a little bit ago of the formation of imagination. It gives kids
Yeah.
the ability to, especially with animation, the ability to see things that
Mm-hmm.
you would never actually see in the real world,
Mm-hmm.
but gives you this actual vision of what it might look like if something unbelievable happened,
Yeah.
and maybe even if
100%.
something heavenly happened, if something from the heavenly realm broke into the earthly realm. It kind of gives you an imagination to see what something like that might look like.
Yeah.
Gives you an imagination of what it might look like on another planet or in another realm, or if you had
Yeah.
superhuman abilities, or it just allows you to think
Yeah.
bigger than um, your day-to-day normal I just go do what I do. And then with kids specifically, as that begins to come out in play, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really powerful that they actually get to act out their imagination. Like, hey, I saw this movie about lions and now me and my friends are going to pretend to be lions, or I've been
Yeah.
watching Batman and Superman, so now we're going to be superheroes on the playground, or whatever that might look like. I think the fostering of the imagination can come alive when you see something visually
Mm-hmm.
rather than just hearing it. Not saying your imagination can't be enacted from a book. It absolutely can, and
Yeah. It
is
can be.
very, very, very well. But when you see it, I think it enacts a different element of your imagination.
And I would definitely say even like different kids respond differently. And so
Yes.
I think shows can help certain, children with their imagination. But yeah, you're 100% right. Like good art in all of its forms gives our imagination, I think the way I really love wording it is it gives our imagination the building blocks to work from,
Yeah.
to imagine a better future, to imagine what the kingdom of God is going to be like. Now, directing it towards the kingdom of God is I think, the role of the church together, obviously led by the parents. Um, but yeah, I mean, 100% agree with you that like there's this wonder and awe that those Disney movies that I was ragging on earlier gave me as a child,
Yeah.
like, and to add to that, it really did give me a vision of hope. And I want to couch that correctly, because if my hope, which everything's a two-edged sword. So
Yeah.
on one hand, for some time I struggled with the hope that these movies were giving me were hollow. But there's something good about still ending every movie with hope. Not necessarily just you get what you want, you're on stage with the band, but hope. Like it points to something positive, because that is that
Mm.
is how me as a child of God should be. And if we can help children begin to see that pattern, that no matter how bad the story is, we end with hope, and then begin to help them see that pattern on the pattern of our lives. It is the pattern of Scripture. It really is. The Revelation, as bad as Revelation gets, the revelation that was given to John, it ends with hope.
Yeah.
Like that is the hope, right? That Christ's work that was finished on the cross will see its ultimate fulfillment when heaven descends down to earth and establishes a new heaven and a new earth, and
Yeah.
Christ begins to reign. And so the job of the church and the parents is to take the seeds of that we see in all forms of human art, even human art made by non-believers, and we say, like, this is the seed that God has put in every one of his the images of him that are walking on earth. Like, we all have this seed, and then take it no matter where the seed is planted, and bring it and say, let's grow this into to the life that views the kingdom of heaven as a hope. And it's when we don't translate from one media to the kingdom of heaven, right? We don't take what I don't know, what Finding Nemo was casting as hope, and we don't help our kids translate that to the hope that we have in the kingdom. I think that's where that's where, like, we fail to make the connection.
You mean the hope of a father reconciling with a son?
Oh, isn't it such like a low hanging fruit? In a lot of kid media has such
Yeah.
low hanging fruit to
Yeah.
make connections to the gospel, and not even like just cheesy connections to the gospel. Like could you imagine what it feels like to be distanced from the person you love the most? And let's sit in that. And there are people in our community who are experiencing that. There are foster children in our community who have been disconnected. What can we do to serve them until and help bring about maybe some short, this on this life, that connection to their earthly dad? But if not, help them see that there is a connection with a heavenly Father that will happen in full one day, right? Like, it's low
Right.
hanging fruit. You can get that from Finding Nemo,
Yeah.
and so many other things, right? So, but just like all parenting, it's work. It means that
Right.
you have to engage fully and cognitively, and say, like, I will not use TV. Oh man, this is maybe how we should. The last thing we should talk about. I will not use TV as a babysitting device,
Right.
which happened to us a lot.
Yeah.
Or me, I actually can't speak for your childhood. I don't know about you, but for me, my parents had a lot of kids. God bless them. Like that, I'm not like ragging on them or anything. But get home. Like okay, so this is me. I get picked up from school, get in the car, and I would start doing my homework in the car. I'm one of those blessed humans who doesn't get car sick by doing
Nice.
stuff like that. And so I do all my homework in the car. I have like my notebook literally in the backseat of the minivan. It's like all my textbooks and stuff, and just cram as much of it I could. And on a good day, I'd get it all done in the car on the drive home. And then I remember in 6th and 7th grade, it was Pokemon. It came on at
Yeah.
like 4 o'clock. So it was like right around the time that we were pulling into the driveway, So
Gotta
get
catch 'em all.
out and got to catch them all, right? Ash and Brock and Misty and the whole thing. And then that would happen, right? And then after Pokemon, we'd put some Disney stuff on and tune in and out of the Disney stuff, even Stevens and Lizzie McGuire and all that stuff through the night, and probably by the end of the day, I'd watch like 3 hours of TV between coming home and going to sleep. And I watched the TV more than I looked at my parents in the eyes, and more than I looked at my siblings in the eyes, for sure. And so maybe the most negative way that I was formed by movies and entertainment growing up as a child was that it was given a priority in my life, and it became a formational tool that by accident superseded the formational tool of my community and my family. Not a tool, but the formational impact of my community and my family. And that's a risk that is even more prevalent today, just not in the form of cable, because who has cable anymore? I'm not judging you if you have cable anymore. And all of our streaming services are just becoming cable anyways. But anyways, but it's, with phones and tablets, we are punting by accident without meaning to, falling into the same temptation that parents in the 80s and 90s fell into. Same exact temptation, which is, I'm really tired. I've got to do the dishes. I've got to do the laundry. I've got to help this kid with homework. I've got to clean that. I've got to have this important conversation with my spouse and all the things. And so just play the PBS app on the tablet, and I'll be on YouTube Kids and just for a minute, and then, you know what I mean? And then a minute becomes an hour, becomes 2 hours. It becomes the only way they won't stop crying in the restaurant or in Walmart. And what we end up doing is we end up providing the most formational element of our child's life. For us, for me, growing up, it was TV, and now it's often a tablet or a phone.
Yeah.
Wow, this ended on a dark note.
Nah. I think the odds are stacked against us as parents now a little bit, because we aren't able to just send our kids outside the same way that I was just sent outside or was just allowed to go outside and play with the neighbors
Yeah.
whenever I wanted.
Yeah.
That is deeply frowned upon now, even if I don't think it's actually any less safe now than it was 20 years ago. But
I think it's statistically more safe, actually. At least, it depends on the community you're in.
Right.
But I think nationwide, it's technically more safe.
Yeah, but it's, for whatever reason, frowned upon, probably because of stories that we have believed. We hear anecdotes and stories and believe that it's definitely going to happen. This is another episode, social media and the 24-hour news cycle and all of these factors that play into make us. Let's everybody go back and listen to the episode with Catherine McNeil that teaches us about how we've been formed by fear. Because that's exactly what we're talking about, that it's no longer...
I hear about child abductions almost every day, or some form of child trafficking, which is terrible.
Yeah.
And it needs to be, but I'm just saying, like, I hear about it every day. So the moment I can't see one of my kids in the backyard, I have a freaking heart attack. And
yes,
I don't
when our parents didn't have to worry about that. And
because they never heard about it.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And of course, it should never, ever, ever happen. That's not what we're saying. However, how is it forming us to constantly believe that it's going to happen to us every day, right?
Yeah. I have been formed to think that my kids will get kidnapped if I don't watch them immediately, which is statistically not true. And it doesn't help me parent them in a healthy way. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yes, exactly right. And so I think the odds are stacked against us in that way, because if our kids can't go outside unsupervised so that we can do the dishes, then what can they do unsupervised? Watch TV, right? Or have a tablet.
It's a physically safe option.
Yes.
Despite the fact that it consistently becomes a psychologically dangerous one.
Which is the perfect segue to my next point, that there's a lot of research now talking about how this upcoming generation, especially right now of teenagers and preteens and even college students and up, are really struggling with mental health in a way that no previous generations have, because of the impact of social media. And so the way that teenage brains are being rewired because of social media and phone usage and screen time and all of these things is, like you just said, it is psychologically damaging children. So we are terrified that things are going to physically happen to them, and we're allowing things to psychologically happen to them right under our care and under our watch. And I think we'll look back on that poorly, but there's something that we can do about it, and I think we should pay attention to those studies and to those effects, and not just to our children's physical safety, but to their mental and spiritual well-being, emotional well-being, and how they are being formed, and how we are being formed as parents and as adults and as people, towards fear and anxiety and depression and all of these negative things that can come from spending too much time on screens rather than in community and in play and outdoors and all the wonderful things that God has gifted us with.
And as we're processing through how to love and serve our children now, I still think it's important just to kind of maybe end on for those of us who have already been formed, by the media of the 90s and the early 2000s and the 80s, wherever, whenever you're born. I think one of the things that I could think about a lot is there's so much good and there's so much difficulty. So again, for me personally, my story is I really do point some of the optimism that I feel like the Lord has given me to those Disney films, growing up. And that's really good, right? I just have a propensity to believe that it's going to be all right. I am way more a person to do big, not necessarily physically, but big life dangerous things, because I just believe things, and part of that, not exclusively, but part of that is because of that content and that media I grew up on. I know, what was was Zoe the Xenon princess? Remember that?
Xenon, yeah.
Xenon, yeah, right? Like, I don't know, I think about that. Like, I don't just like all these like little stories, and it always ended up great for them. And there's this part of me that thinks that could be the same way. And that's not all bad. But when I became a new creation, the Lord's been helping me process through what was really good and what to hold on to, and to help see that all that stuff that was good were things that were holding seeds of the kingdom. And so I think we can do that.
Yeah.
We can go on that journey where we process through who we are today. How do we become that person? And where were the seeds of the kingdom in that? And then begin to let go of the ways I was formed in ways of materialism, in ways of discontentment, in ways of believing that satisfaction has to be found here in this temporal life, and that discomfort and grief are bad things that have to be found. Anxiety is a bad thing that I have to do away with. It's a thing to be fixed. It's not, like all these things we just, because we've been taught that if I'm experiencing these, they must be a bad thing, and being able to begin to process through that's not the intent that those creators of that media ever intended, and they aren't things I have to keep. That being a new creation, I can enter into the far more difficult and ambiguous elements of life that engage in the new kingdom. I will just say, I think that process is made more healthy when we engage in good art. So I do think that for me, part of the process of undoing some of the difficulties is by reading really not complicated, but emotionally complicated books, a lot of classics that delve in. I'll always recommend Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis, which is a small text, but a really amazing piece of art. And there's a lot of really good art made by believers today that delve into some of the more difficult complexities of life, and they don't paint those Disney-like images and pictures of life. And they give and this is the key, our imaginations the building blocks that they were lacking when we were growing up with that media. Many of us, not all of us. And we give our imaginations new building blocks. And so we begin to create different expectations for life, different desires in life, different goals for life. And hopefully those desires and goals can be formed by the thing that should be giving us the most building blocks, I think, which is our relationship to God through prayer, through the reading of scripture, through the community found in the body of Christ, through good preaching, and through praise and worship music. Like, all these become part of those art tools, because they're all elements of art that build up our imagination and help put what has been put in our minds from childhood in a wider, healthier context. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Living Room Disciple podcast. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and drop in the comments what were some of the movies that you were formed by as a kid. We want to know. Also, feel free to reach out to us on social media or on our website, livingroomdisciple.com, to send us requests for things to talk about on the show, or topics you want us to cover. Huge shout out to Micah Pop for all the amazing production work, to Eric Church for getting this podcast out into the world, to Daniel Ramirez for composition of our music, and to you for sticking around and tuning into the Living Room Disciple podcast, where discipleship finds a home.